I heard the term recently and now it sounds so fancy. I can't not use it. Procedural knowledge. All of this procedural knowledge leads us to have the voice we have today, which is a collection of what has worked to get by in rooms that have been complicated with power dynamics, right? And then the question is, do those habits still serve us if the goal is no longer to get by, but to get power?
You are listening to How To Thought Leadership with Julie Morris.
So, did you know that the word that I always start things off with and regret it is so? It's so. I stick a so in front of anything. I don't know why. And then I'll make some noise and I'll deep breath and then I'll exhale and then I'll go, oh my gosh, someone's going to have to delete that from the podcast too. There's a lot that we have to grow into, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you are wondering about some of the tactics of thought leadership. Well, some of that is what we do when we speak and we teach and we present, when we use our voice. Some of you have no idea what your voice sounds like. Even if you recorded a podcast or a video, you might be afraid to listen to it. And that's okay. We need some more tools. We need to know how to use our voice. We need a little bit of technique. We need to know how to unleash this thing around us, in us, right? This thing that looks like vision, this thing that looks like passion. And what's amazing is that my fabulous guest, Samara Bay, has so much to say about the power of your voice. And oh my goodness, if you watch her on Instagram, her reels, her videos, it inspired me so much. But I also have a lot of questions and I need to do a lot of practice to get better at using the power of my voice. So what I can say is this: I'm so glad to get to have you listen along to this conversation because I got to ask some real questions. We always wonder, like, if we get to sit down for an interview, what am I going to ask this person? There's so much to cover. Well, with her, I had some real immediately applicable questions. So I can't wait to hear what you think. Join us as we get started right now. Samara, I am now getting to do this podcast with you. And as I was doing my makeup today and watching your reels and getting even more excited, I thought to myself, what should I be doing right now? I was clearing my throat. I was hydrating. What should I have done to get ready for this podcast?
Well, did what you did work?
I don't think so. Because I feel like the almonds almost like made my throat kind of cloggy again. I feel like the water is good, but it felt like it's not sticking almost enough. Like it's not.
But let me ask a seemingly less practical question, but it is actually, secretly just as practical. How is your spirit?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And one of my questions here to talk to you about is like, how do you take the rest of life and basically put it in a box and deal with like later and really be present when it's the moment, when the moment is here? And I would say that for me, I am utterly optimistic always, right? Like I make a joke with one of my dear clients' friends, and she and I will say like a little meerkat. Like I will crawl out of my little hole in the morning and I will see the sun and I will stretch out and become like, I will embrace the day. So I would say my spirit is definitely there, like even on a bad day, but I would say I'm pretty good. But I'm also here, like my father's in the hospital and I've been spending 12 plus hours a day with him, just right by his side doing that. But that is very much present. Yeah. Like anyone listening to this, they have something that's very much present.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think part of it actually is being careful with that box metaphor. Cause like if putting something in that box makes us feel free, great. If putting in that box makes us feel like we're having to compartmentalize ourselves into smaller, sections of ourselves that no longer feel whole or real, then actually we can take a moment and go, how much more real can I be in this space? How much can the space handle? Which is not a question we necessarily know the answer to, but is a provocation into something more interesting. I mean, part of what I'm interested in is how we show up in business contexts, in whether it's a physical work environment or if it's, sounding quote unquote professional on a microphone. How we approach each of those with a little bit of a more sort of wily, mischievous spirit, especially if we're talking about, I should say, women and people of color and immigrants or anyone for whom an accent, you're well aware, marks you as, different. For so many of us, we just know, we don't even talk about, we don't have language for, but we know that there's like a dominant culture sound and the rest of us are kind of trying to chase it if we want to get taken seriously. And for me, this is like a launching off point for everything, because when I say it out loud like that, it's obvious that it's totally, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Fucked up. And yet we also want to, gain power in a society that is judging us. So it's irresponsible of me to say no longer make any concessions, show up as yourself in all moments. Right? That would be a really irresponsible move on my part as a coach.
I agree.
But similarly, the optimist in me, the revolutionary maybe in me, also wants to suggest what ways can we actually push the envelope a little bit? How much more can we show up like ourselves? How much more can we be emotionally honest? How much more can we say, in your case, I'm dealing with a lot of really heavy stuff and I have an intrinsic spirit of optimism. It's being tested and I'm living inside of it and I'm choosing and I'm feeling things. Like those are all real. And when you show up with that level of honesty, you allow it, you're literally spreading the permission. You're saying, so here's how I am. Thus, you don't have to tell me, but you can be however the fuck you want.
That's your point exactly. Works. I love that. So we have to hold intention. It's like we can't disregard any part of us, the part of us that does need to provide for our families, right? And actually have money, income, do business, be in the world and kind of playing the game, and yet also stop disregarding the rest of us. And the rest of us is a whole person. And we toss around this term. Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. No. You go. Well, I was going to say there's so much identity stuff at play here. I mean, as like I will describe myself now, and it will be like awkward and ill-fitting as any of us would feel if we were doing this. I am a middle-aged, cute white lady who's super smiley and who talks professional enough that people tend to take me seriously, partly because I have 2 Ivy League degrees. So that doesn't hurt. So I walk through the world with all of these aspects of my identity signaling to people. And I also swear, sometimes you might have noticed, I also laugh. I also am willing to sort of say and and not know what I'm going to say next because I have practiced doing that in public and being okay with it. And all of these parts of me personally, right? This is such a personal thing, show up in these spaces. And I am at the point now with the amount of power and privilege I have. I like to challenge myself to show up even more honestly, right? To say the real thing, or to have my emotional hits actually happen and be visible to people and not try to hide them. And that's not a safe enough space for everyone, but it is an invitation that if you're feeling an ooh when you hear me say that, maybe there's something inside of that for you.
Are we kidding? I think there's something there for everybody, but I think the only reason that they wouldn't have felt that is because we have been told that the real us for so long is not worthy, not worth it, not valuable, that there is no power there. And I think the reason also that we struggle so much with authenticity, but also we struggle with the fact that most people are listening to this because they know they have to start, because they will be kept out of the places that they want to be, right? Thought leadership, personal brand, all of these things. They build this platform for you that is attractive to employers and to partners. We want to partner with people who have that platform and that visibility. And if it opens doors that weren't open to them, they're willing to finally bite the bullet and do this work. And so, but we've also been told the real you, be quiet, be quiet. That wasn't an appropriate time to speak up in that meeting. We would like you to speak up less. How you said that wasn't right. How you phrased that wasn't right. You don't have executive presence. Interrupted in the middle of a meeting to be told that that is not an appropriate thing to say or do. And a lot of the women also that would listen to this, and this is for all people, but the women that follow me very often are ones who have been the only one that looks like them in the room, period. And often the only woman too. So they, by nature of that, are told that what you are is not appropriate and not relevant here. And maybe we only have you here because we need to check a box, but we don't actually want you here. And so authenticity now for this paradigm that we live in is almost like everything in our body screams to say, stop, this isn't safe. It's going to cost you more than you have to pay.
You know, there's so much in what you're saying and so much feels intractable. I'm all about practical tips.
Yes.
And I'm like thinking of 60 of them as you're talking.
Yes.
But one of them is, and I offer this obviously if it's useful for you listening, I do like to let ourselves off the hook a little bit so that it's not like we are being tested in every moment of every day,
right,
and passing or failing. I like to really focus on, as I put it, the moments that matter. That might mean when we're pitching our idea, when we're talking in a meeting, maybe that's a thing, or maybe that's not a thing.
Right.
When we're giving a presentation, when we're doing a podcast, if it's new to us, right? When we're in a position to own the space, to say my idea matters, then we get to talk about, okay, so what is the process of owning our ideas out loud?
I love it.
And then we can let go those moments in those, the lower stakes moments where it maybe feels toxic. It maybe feels like microaggressions. Those are all real. Those are all very real. But I'm interested in, I'm interested in a lot of things. But one of them is I have this little note for myself here that says, what do we sound like when we feel safe?
Yeah.
And that level of provocation, right? Well, how do I feel safe on the inside? How do I, read the room in a way that helps me build up this story that I'm safe? That's real. I would love us to reserve that for the moments when we really are trying to speak about what's close to our heart.
Right.
And not worry quite so much about some of the, interpersonal dynamics we really don't have a lot of control over.
Absolutely. So I love coming from the side of, where I just stated everything in its most raw and frustrating. That's not even the most raw because, to the point that you just shared, it's like our friends who are people of color who are not white. Very often it is much more, it's so much worse than I can personally wrap my head around. And we know this, right? So
I had a woman I was speaking to yesterday who's a C-suite level leader at a massive corporation, who's a woman of color. And she told me that listening to my workshop, which she heard back a few months ago, it reminded her of that moment in The Little Mermaid where the deal is done and Ursula rips the voice out of the throat.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Cool. Totally.
It's
So,
like the holy moments where we hear these things and we just have to sit and just be grateful that we get to be here to hear these things.
So the reason I talk about the quote unquote moments that matter is it feels a bit more doable. Right. And then the question is to go back to your very first question that I sort of dodged because I was curious about your inner feelings.
Yes.
But the very first question is, what should you have done in the moments before the moment that matters, quote unquote, right?
Yes.
And I love this question so much for all of us. And obviously the reason I answered your question with the question is because it is personal, right? You all get to figure out which of the billions of tools actually works. But I'd love you to define works in this case, not just what makes you feel like you have a clear throat, but also what makes you feel the most sense of freedom and permission. So what does that? Is it Here's a few. I'll throw out a few suggestions, right?
Please bring
One,
it.
there's a bit of a thought experiment that we can all do that is
Love it.
It works so well that I do it before every time I have to speak, and I still do it. I still do it, which is bring to mind, and maybe you can do this in your off time, light a candle, take a few minutes. Bring to mind an occasion when someone really got you. Maybe it was even somebody that you admire, and they made it clear that they admired you back. Maybe it was just a little email. Maybe it was a hug. Maybe it was a comment in passing. But the invitation is, remember that moment that made you feel all, glowy, and
the glow.
Breathe that memory in so that your whole body has the opportunity to feel it again. This is called, in the social psychology world, priming for power. It literally is an invitation to get your body remembering what it feels like to feel seen, so that you walk into that space ready optimistically to feel seen again. And it works because you also know that if you do the opposite, if you prime yourself for failure, right, and you worst case scenario woofy yourself, it's totally understandable.
Right.
I'm not here to shame any of our, nervous habits around speaking at all. But just calling out that does the opposite to our body. It shuts us down. And actually, I love to suggest to all of us that we have two different speaking styles. So, I mean, of course, this is a joke because we have 80 billion different speaking styles, all of us.
Yes, but we need some contextual. Let's narrow it down.
What if there are two categories? And the first category is what we sound like when we're in what linguists would call an evaluative space, when we can tell we're being evaluated. Maybe it's a literal job interview or a pitch, or maybe it's not. It's just that feeling of I'm being judged. People are sizing me up.
Oh, yes.
What do we tend to do? And this is different for each of us. You can even, write out, make yourself write out like 20 things that your body does that your mind tends to think when you can tell you're being judged. What happens to your voice? And then, if that's one of the two communication styles we have, and that's what happens when we feel like we have something to prove, what's the other? What do we feel like? What do we sound like when we don't feel like we have anything to prove? Maybe it's when you're with your absolute favorite people and I like to offer when you're telling like oh my God, you'll never guess who I just ran into type of a story, when you've got that physical urge to communicate.
Yes. Okay.
And it's almost impossible, I have to say, to like think of what we're like in those moments, because part of why those moments work is that we're in the moment, right? We're not actually like observing ourselves. But this is your little, this is your little like squirrely invitation to try to just catch yourself in one of those moments, or to think back, as I was saying, at in a moment when you felt like you were really being seen. What version of you shows up in those moments? How much? To get super technical, because I'm a voice person,
I would love that.
How much range do you have up and down in your pitch? What's your volume tend to be like? How much do you say like and or maybe not? Because when you have to tell somebody about who you ran into, you don't need to hedge. You can actually be more direct, it turns out, in your body. How much do you swear? How much do you laugh? How much, what is your own style? What happens with your accent? What happens if you're multilingual? Which language tends to take over, right? Like, just knowing some of these things about yourself and honoring that version of you who has nothing to prove is instructive. Not always one-to-one, right? Can't always bring her with you into that scary space, but maybe a little bit.
So to make it kind of just as tactical and clear as we can be, because I think like I love getting lost in biology, neuroscience, physiology, understanding why we act the way we do, why we react the way we do, and then wanting to also just go, okay, from here on out, could I be different and show up more like how I could show up? Like, what would change right now? So it's funny because I know that the moment we're done here, our podcast editors will take this and they will do what's called compression, and they will make sure that there's not any massive jumps in, the volume going too high or low. And I think that So that came to mind for me. It's like, wow. So is that a good thing if I lean into some of that, but maybe not go full on out to where I'm just overleaning, to your point?
It's an interesting question. I mean, it also brings up questions of inherent bias in technology, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's some
So
interesting
true.
articles on the internet about how men's voices are better picked up by the early microphones, and we still use some version of that technology today. So, women
Yes.
have been told when they go into journalism that they need to lower their voice just because it sounds better on the text.
Interesting.
Right. So like I like to bring a little bit of a skeptical eye to some of that. But I also, what your question brings up for me is also
Mm-hmm.
like just how much range all of us have in terms of the version of us that shows up. Like
Yeah.
I know that if I ask you, those of you listening, who your favorite voices are, who you love to listen to. Obviously, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
we can't separate out what they're talking about from how they're saying it, but
Right.
who do you actually like to have in your ear? You know, I know that I know a few things. One, there'll be a big range, right? People will say,
Yeah.
I get a lot of what's his name, Attenborough, the guy who does the nature shows.
Oh, yes, of
But
course.
then a lot of people who really are thinking in the moment, oh wait, who makes me want to like share their video because there's a virality, there's like an inherent sense of shareability.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how about AOC? How about that activist who said the real thing in that real moment? What, how about
Hmm.
Cory Booker when he was talking to the Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson at her confirmation hearing, and like didn't ask her tough questions, but just did like an ode to how important she is. And it was so emotional, and it made anybody who watched it probably get emotional. Like, oh, so those moments, first of all, there's a massive range. And second of all, you might be thinking to yourself, my favorite voices tend to, and then what? Do they tend to be the voices that sound like this and that have this kind of gentle, now we're doing a meditation. That's okay, right?
Hmm.
I
Okay.
I I tend to be drawn to people who sound so real
Hmm.
that there's an instant sense of trustworthiness. Like for me,
Right.
this voice that sounds like this might do nice things to my nervous system. But if I'm actually being asked, do I trust you? The answer might not be yes. Because there's something sort of hidden and artificial about
I
this.
know, right? It's like, you're not showing up
I mean,
as real you want something from me.
right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Or you're artificially
Yes.
shortening how much
Hmm.
pitch variation there can be in order
Yes.
to create a reaction in my body. Like,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely. Like,
sure.
it
But
feels
there obviously that's like,
manipulative.
right. That's what I was
Yeah.
going to say is like, where does that go from stylistic into manipulation? But,
That's so interesting.
you know,
So are you saying that if we don't know if there's not this level of awareness about how we show up now and about who we like and what that all kind of connects with, that we're not going to really bring this part of us that is the magic part into the moment? Because I think that that's, for me, what has been the hardest part about public speaking for me is not believing in myself. And for years and years and years and years and years, I thought I was the worst public speaker ever. And I gave up entirely on trying to pursue that. And then over COVID, I found this app called Clubhouse. And all of a sudden, live audio was a thing. And I could, in the moment, get better at being concise, at being heard, and at engaging people. Because if you didn't engage them, they would leave and you would see them
mm-hmm.
leave. And so to get to kind of
Love this.
turn,
Yes
right?
is my answer. Yes. And you know what my
Okay,
version of that is, as you
please.
say this, is as you know, I've been doing these 1 minute reels on Instagram for a year.
Love.
And you can actually, I mean, I'm not encouraging you to do this. It's a little self-serving, but it would be interesting if anybody wanted to sort of pop in over the 50 that I made in 2022 and see how I improved. Because one thing I know I started to do just in the final few months
Yeah.
was edit less. Okay. I have a minute, and you, my audience, knows I have a minute. So we're both in on the joke that
Wow.
I can't talk about some profound subject with more nuance than a minute will allow. I can't. You know it. I know it. Cool. And so then the question is, well, what happens if I press play and talk about the thing that I've been thinking about? And by the way, I have forced myself. I've made it very clear. Forced sounds violent. That's not what I mean at all. I've been very intentional, I should say, about not overthinking those 1 minute reels. I drop them every Tuesday morning, and I tend to think about what I'm going to talk about maybe when I'm lying in bed Monday night. Maybe when I'm driving my kid home when I'm driving home, rather, after dropping my kid off in the morning and I'm heading towards recording it. And I have like an idea of something that maybe percolated because of something in the news that weekend or whatever, but I really try to not overthink it. And then the question is, what happens on the, in the moment? And, watch them if they're instructive at all, but it's the same thing as what you're talking about, that the more we do it, the more we give ourselves permission. That's just a thing, right? That's what practice means.
Yes.
But also, in my case, it meant that I think that actually my work on some very, very basic level is about how and why we hide vocally and what to do about it.
We hide, absolutely. So we hide vocally.
And so for me, the editing, right? That early was a way of hiding, of like, let me just try to get it right in like short little bits, and then I'll like knit those short little bits together.
Right.
Fair. It's okay. But like the next challenge was obviously, how do I do that for a full minute? And if a bit doesn't quite work, breathing and letting it be. Right. One time
letting it be.
One time I said literally twice in a single minute, and it really stuck out to me. And I was like, it's good enough.
It's good enough. I like to say my favorite color is done. Let it roll. But yeah, that's self-correcting, that, we have to decide what is our minimum viable product. If it means that I said something twice, if it means that, what do I call good enough? Because most people will not recognize between like 85% and 100%. Once they hit 85%, like it's good enough for any and everyone.
And inside of that is interesting conversation around perfectionism, right? But also around all kinds of societal messages. Hold on. All kinds of societal messages around why we would have to be perfect. I mean, I feel like there's so much like stop with your perfectionism hamster wheel, and not quite enough. Why did it serve us? And I would say the same thing is, this is why I think about all the vocal hiding. Most of the habits that we've picked up, and especially for women, there's a lot of like really front of mind thoughts around vocal fry and upspeak, these ways that we maybe end a statement with a question habitually, as though not just saying the statement, but also saying, do you know what I mean? Which, by the way, when you put it that way, is kind of efficient. And then there's also vocal fry, where instead of just saying something with enough breath support that we speak it all the way to the end, we say it and then energetically maybe sort of like take it back at the end. And it goes in our throat, and it sounds like, bacon frying, hence the term vocal fry.
Oh my gosh.
Vocal fry is super useful. You'll hear it everywhere. If you didn't know what it was until now, you'll suddenly hear it everywhere. We use it in all kinds of useful ways. I mean, linguists will say it serves a purpose. Every habit we've picked up, in fact, this is one of my favorite things about linguistics. Linguists will say every habit we have vocally, we picked up for a reason. It worked. So maybe going into our throat at the end of a statement that would otherwise seem quite strong softens it and makes the people around us like us more.
Well, we want to be liked. And so, if I'm not liked, no one will listen to this podcast again.
And not only that, but how were we when we were 3? Right. And deeply on a survival level,
right?
Dependent on the people around us to turn toward us and not away from us. Humans have this incredible, like, let's take a second and not demonize it and just honor. We have this incredible ability to pick up the nuance in the room.
Yes.
And turn towards what works. And then.
That's powerful.
And then We do it again when we, go off to college or whatever the step is where we leave home. And we do it again when we're dating. And we do it again when we're in a job and learning how to be quote unquote professional. And all of this, I heard the term recently and now it sounds so fancy. I can't not use it. Procedural knowledge. All of this procedural knowledge leads us to have the voice we have today, which is a collection of what has worked to get by in rooms that have been complicated with power dynamics, right? And then the question is,
yes,
do those habits still serve us? If the goal is no longer to get by, but to get power?
Yeah. Okay. So that is so powerful. And I think it's both rhetorical, but also needs a response. If I had to let go of one habit today, and I have an instance in mind that I would love your thoughts on.
Oh,
I have to go advocate today. I have to advocate on behalf of, and I think that a lot of people will understand as caregivers that you will have to advocate for the person you love at some point and try to get someone to do what they maybe not are inclined to do. I want to get my dad into a specific location for a rehab facility, because if I don't, then his wife won't be able to travel to him. So I have to use my voice, and I am inclined probably to over complexify the situation, to talk maybe more quickly than I would want to, and to not get the thing done that I want done. So could you give me any recommendations about how I can immediately do better? The last time I talked to the doctor, I got in trouble because I got that doctor totally guarded, like arms folded, looking away. I could tell by her nonverbal that something wasn't flying. And so I don't want to push her away today. And so anyone I think can adapt their own situation to like, I need this thing and I'm afraid I'm not going to get it because I'm going to blow it again.
Let me ask one clarifying question. What is what she wants, or whoever whoever the team is of people that you're advocating to, are they going to want something different? I mean, is your convincing really convincing from an absolutely opposite standpoint, or what do you have in common?
I think that they would be open to it if I can explain it without probably getting too complex and complicated. But I could see them being open to it, but I could also see them going, screw you. Like, no, we don't have time for this.
And what's the simplest reason that your dad needs to be in this? Is it so that his wife can visit?
Yes.
And what does her visiting do for him?
It helps improve his entire state of mind and being. If he were to do this alone, it would be too hard.
And they're doctors, so they also want him to improve.
Yes.
So, right. So just finding like the true common ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the applicable thing, I think, for all of us here is this makes me think about this really, really valuable tone conversation, because what you're talking about is actually tone, right? It's not necessarily the words you choose, although words matter.
Absolutely.
But it's how to not get her hackles up, as you say.
Absolutely.
So there's this well-known phrasing in the, like, I don't know, I feel like every Harvard Business Review has like a new article about this every week. The strength warmth balance. So picture two totally separate dials. These are not opposites. They're separate dials from 1 to 10. On the strength side, it's how weak to strong we come across. So weak is, I mean, I don't really know, like I don't know anything about this, right? That's the words, but it's also how I just said it. And then the strength side of that might be, this is my area of expertise. I know what I'm talking about. 1 to 10. Warmth side is how cold, closed off we come across. I don't need you. I'm not here for you. To warm, I am radiating love. I'm taking care of you.
Dang, girl.
So no matter,
that was incredible. I just got goosebumps. You did that.
Ooh, thank you.
Please.
No matter how much literal power, like what the power dynamic status is in a room,
yes,
independent of that, we can all be thinking about these two dials. And here's my invitation, because those two dials, I think, sound a little clinical, especially since we're talking about a hospital. It's like, great, how do I up my warmth dial, right? Like we're human beings, not machines.
Yes.
So I'm interested in, okay, so what actually works?
Yes.
And for each of us, first of all, think to yourself, if you are a little lopsided in how you tend to come across when you enter a room, which one does tend to be a little bit higher up on the 1 through 10, right? For some of us, we already know, oh, I get called cold all the time and it's so annoying. Or I get called, angry or too strong or too direct.
Yeah.
For some of us, it's the opposite, right? We've so leaned into the lessons we learned early on how to sound nice that we get things like, oh my God, you are so adorable. Right? Which suggests that your warmth dial is higher than your strength dial. And all of the data, so this is the annoying part, just to get it out of the way, all of the data internationally suggests that for women to get heard, so we're just talking strategy here, balancing your strength and warmth is the best bet. So they don't have to both be at 10. But if you're going to say something strong, here's what I need you to do. How much can you match that with warmth? And by that, what I really mean is, if your vibe is, I've got this, can you also be saying, without words, with their energy, I've got you? Even if you seemingly have less power in the space, I've got this, I've got you. And I like that a lot more because, I'm a parent. Like, I can instantly think of occasions, and you don't have to be, obviously. You can be talking about your own parent, or you can be talking about helping your partner when they've had a rough day, or your dear friend who's going through heartbreak, when it's not about you at all. And you were just showing up to say, oh, I am the right person. You called the right person. Hello. Hi, I'm going to hold space for you. And also, I've got you, right? I've got this. I've got you. And that blend we do, my invitation is, we soft brain here, right? Don't start to come up with all the reasons why this isn't true. Just gentle, gentle, gentle. We do this for the people who need us when they need us.
Yes.
We know how to blend strength and warmth. The question is, how do we do it in these high stakes moments when our nervous system is feeling all nutso because if we don't get the thing, it will hurt our dad.
Yeah.
So all of that.
So am I aiming for a 10?
All of that is, you can aim for whatever. Aim for a 6. I don't know. I mean, the number part, I think, is the part that starts to feel kind of manipulative or clinical.
But it's that
but what I
matching
want,
of the two.
right? What the matching of the two. So if what you're saying is, here's what I need.
Yes.
I know my dad, he needs to be able to have access to his wife. That will improve his physical health.
Yeah.
You can also be saying, and, oh, isn't that so great that we found this solution? Because I know you all, your doctors, obviously improving his physical health is what you want as well. I hope this works out.
I think that if anyone else is feeling the same thing I am, what you're feeling right now is, can I just have Samara in my back pocket, in my ear, in an earpiece
and somebody said that because
situation.
My audiobook is coming out.
It really is. So let's please talk about everything they can do to learn from you.
Thank you. I will. But also, I just want to say, like, I've practiced this a lot, and it's doable, and it is not magic. It's not strength and warmth. I've got this. I've got you. Here's the secret beyond everything I've just said, which is like kind of the setup, I guess. I think here's the real secret.
Yes.
You might have listening, some deep-seated archetypal type stories getting in the way around what warmth means or what strength means. So if you accidentally associate strength with meanness, with some masculine coded, overconfidence, pride, skeeviness, it will be hard to show up strong. So maybe you can start to collect for yourself, like a vision board in your own mind or physically, but like a collect for yourself examples of a kind of strength that you actually admire. Maybe it's a grandmother. Maybe it's, Michelle Obama. Maybe it's somebody or something that makes you feel good. So you can see strength as something that you would actually want. And similarly on the warmth side, obviously there's like 100 years, 1,000 years of messaging that for women to be more palatable, they should smile more. And I think that's a real perversion of this idea of warmth, right? To be deeply clear, I am not saying smile more. I am saying dare yourself to take care of the other people in the space, even if they don't deserve it. It is a challenge that you give yourself because it's strategically going to work. It might also spread love, which is like pretty good.
Change the space you're in.
We all know people who can do that, right? You walk into a space with a certain energy and the room changes, right? We definitely can each do this.
So I think that as we're listening to this, inevitably with podcasts, right? It's like we have this awareness that people are going to listen just kind of one at a time. But I can imagine 1,000 people in the room right now kind of staring up and feeling hopeful for the first time in a long time. And feeling like all these situations that feel like they're bearing down and no one is helping. It's like finally feels like now I have some tactical tools to go and help myself. Like maybe I don't need to be rescued in the way that I thought I did. We have been trained, I think, also to look at mentors and sponsors as the ones who are going to reach out a hand and rescue us out of the situation. And one of the things I like to say is 2023, for me, it is really all about don't wait for someone else to recognize you anymore. It is time to recognize yourself. Like you are here to rescue you. Right. And
also
not just
we,
Please,
I mean, it's what you're saying. And
yes. And
I like to say finding your voice is a group activity. Like
ooh.
Part of what happens when we have these moments when somebody says you're too much, or they interrupt us, or they whatever, and the lifetime of that we each have, what I call our voice story, right? The collection of tiny moments that we are embarrassed have rattled around in our head ever since.
Wow.
It's such a collective issue, and we don't know it, right? So part of what I'm interested in is throwing open the doors and saying, whenever you feel a hit of private shame, I don't talk right, that you notice that as being a symptom of living in I'm just going to say it, patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalist, society, telling us that there is a standard for how to sound professional and how to sound powerful, and you don't reach that standard. And I'm here to say, just to remind us what I think we might even know deep in our wisdom, which is that standard is bogus. That standard does not help us. It never will. And there is enough of us that we can change the standard right where we are. What I like to say is that is the old sound of power. It's everything that you would, all the terms you would describe, Stephen Colbert with, like, not a bad guy, right? Not his fault. But if you are never going to sound like Stephen Colbert, call it. And instead, take that list seriously of like, who do you love to listen to who doesn't sound like Stephen Colbert? God bless Stephen. I hope I get to chat with Stephen Colbert. But like, who do you love to listen to who does not sound like that short list of what power has traditionally sounded like? That if you Google, how do I sound authoritative, the internet will spew out at you. Who does not sound like that and yet holds power? Here are some examples I love. I always think of Esther Perel. She's got an accent. She's older, right? And yet, oh my God, I will follow her anywhere. I said Michelle Obama, obviously, right? Yes. The Obamas were a huge cultural, are. And when they hit the scene, I think, were a huge cultural moment in changing what power sounds like. Sounding like the entire history of the life you've actually lived inside your own mouth. AOC as well, right? But also local heroes and people's, those mentors. It's not that we need to turn to them for advice. It's that we get to listen with a critical ear and go, are they doing something fresh? Does that give me permission to do something fresh? Are they not? And do I feel the weight of how much they've played into a system that doesn't serve them? And I am the new sound of power, and I get to change that, me and my friends.
I am the new sound of power. Oh, there's a ton to unpack there. And I just would love to start it by asking you, So there is no way you could talk about all this stuff like you do with such an intimate knowledge and awareness of it if you hadn't at one point maybe not felt like this.
Yeah.
Do you have a story?
Yeah, I do. I have a few, but this is what really comes to mind when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 24, I was in the middle of an acting program, master's degree in acting. I was very serious about doing, Shakespeare in the Park and Broadway and all that.
Amazing.
And in the very middle of a 3-year program, I lost my voice. Like it was gone for months, and I was not sick. And I mean, you can imagine for any of us, especially if you're chatty, it was a huge blow to my ego, to my sense of identity. I finally got myself to an ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And they stuck this little camera up my nose and down the back of my throat. And I got a photo, I will never forget, of my vocal cords with a little angry blister on each side. So if you're just listening, I have a V shape I'm doing with my hands here. This is the shape of the vocal cords. And the blisters were right at the same side on either side of that V, which is a telltale sign of vocal nodules.
Yes.
In my case, I had habitually, without realizing it, been speaking a tiny bit below my body's quote unquote optimum pitch.
Dang.
Why did I pick up a sound that was a little tiny bit lower? I mean, we can just guess, right? Like probably in high school came across as really warm and smiley.
Yeah.
And I must have thought subliminally,
Mm-hmm.
how do I make sure I get taken seriously? How do I make sure that no one messes with me? And you know what? When I talked a little bit lower, I seemed like I was in on the joke. And, it worked in a way until it literally didn't. And I lost my voice and I had to relearn how to talk. But the moment that really stuck out as I was thinking back on this was I got back to class that day. I had played hooky on the morning session to finally have this doctor's appointment. I walk in and the head of the program stops class in front of everybody, turns to me and says, "So, what's the diagnosis?" And I say with this painful throat and it's so depressing. I was like, it turns out it's vocal nodules. I need to go on vocal rest. And he goes, just as I thought, bad usage. It's right. Listen, it's such a random phrase. It doesn't hold a lot of cultural significance on its own, but I felt it in that moment, right? You can hear it when I say it. Bad usage. You didn't just get hurt. You did it to yourself. And the physical shame that I got hit with when he said that stayed with me for years. I mean, my voice got better. I moved on. But that question mark of why would I have picked up something that sabotaged me?
Right.
In a way, I wrote this book for me at 24, having that question.
Yeah.
The voice recovered. The sense of self around why I would pick up something that would disempower me did not recover. I was left with that question. And now I know, okay, so I picked up this habit that worked in a certain context.
Yes.
In high school, in whenever. No one's fault, seems to have worked. Cool. And then it didn't. And then it caught up to me. And then I had this inflection point of learning, a new way of speaking, what habit to let go. And I fortunately had a speech pathologist who was cool. And I worked with her for a month, and I did this whole vocal rest, relearning how to speak thing. But I just let the shame part of it just sit in the background because I had no answer to that for many more years. And, I bring this story up because, for most of us, if we've been told you say too much, your ums and uhs are really getting in the way. Maybe it's from a well-meaning mentor. You'll never be taken seriously if your voice is so high.
Right.
There's the obvious, challenge of how do I fix this if I even want to? And then there's the secondary challenge of all the emotional shit around it. And that's really why the book is called Permission to Speak, like the speaking part. I'm always happy to get into the minutia of, right? I have this background coaching actors in Hollywood. I will talk about vowels and consonants and the musicality of spoken speech, but none of it matters without the sense of permission. What the possibility is inside my voice.
I love that so much. And I thank you so much for bringing us into your story. Because if they remember nothing else, they'll remember my dad in the hospital and me advocating for him. And they will remember this. And that's the power of story. And so,
well, and related, just to name
please.
this, because I do also talk about this in the book, there's like a bit of a cultural truth around women kind of avoiding telling their stories. We say to ourselves, my story's not big enough. It's not interesting enough.
Right.
It's too self-indulgent to talk about it. And it certainly doesn't match the hero's journey, which is a very masculine coded story, right? In heroes' journeys from, the ancient Greeks to Star Wars, a guy goes on a journey and women are either helpers or getter in the weighers or the person waiting back home. So rather than sort of just recasting it as the woman is in the lead and the journey is massive and epic, I would also love to suggest that tiny, tiny, tiny stories, a single sentence, a single conversation, in my case, right, the 2 words bad usage, those stories are epic in scale if they give us feelings. The epic doesn't have to be because we went on a massive adventure, And when we tell our stories, the only other secret I think that has super helped me is it isn't self-indulgent. If it's a story that will be absolutely useless for the people listening, it is. But that's almost never the case. Why are we telling a story? We're not either we're telling a story because we're saying, help me, I need help, which is also totally fair. I mean, that's a call to action for your community and most people want to help. But the other reason we tell a story, if we're in kind of a power position of any sort, is to be of use. I like 100%. To say, if we have a certificate in CPR and the person in front of us is choking, then raising your hand and saying, I have CPR is not self-indulgent. So the question is the person in front of us in need of our story? They're just not obviously choking on the outside. And can we use a little bit of imagination, be generous to ourselves and them, and say, what if they're choking? What if my story will help? Let me just try.
So, I know that it has helped me so much and already increased my confidence about the discussions that I'm going to get to go be a part of today. Is there any other lifeline you might be able to throw out at me as I maybe feel, if I, especially back before I started practicing all of this public speaking, I would be terrified that my voice would shake. I would be terrified that I would do something wrong. And all of that fear makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Help me out. What else could I do?
I would say I have 2 things. One is, the word authenticity is like so overused, like, sure, truthness. Great. Which version of me, I like to define it in a super practical way, which is authenticity is talking about what matters to us, like it matters to us. That means being more emotionally available than we're used to. It means there is a possibility that our voice will shake, that we will have tears appear in our eyes, that we will actually sound enthusiastic when we're actually excited about something rather than pretending we're not because it will be too uncool or high maintenance. This is a practice and it is scary and it doesn't work in every room. Right? So give yourself a huge amount of grace that if the room is not safe enough, the room is not safe enough. But every speech that we've ever felt that sense of virality about is because somebody is taking the gamble to care out loud, as I put it, to care out loud. And when we care out loud, we spread care I mean, especially if we're doing the strength warmth thing, right? People are not pushed away. They lean in. And that is such a big cultural story we have to shift, because most of us have this sort of pathologized sense of emotions. Don't get too emotional. We've been told that too many times,
Yes.
right? If we start to tear up, if a movie star who wins an Oscar gets on that stage in front of millions of people and starts to tear up because it is the biggest moment in their life, what do? Apologize. I told myself I wouldn't cry. That breaks my heart. We are animal bodies that have feelings.
Yes.
Of course, we are pushing through societies that have stories, and we're trying to not play into those stories. So all of that is real. But when we have any opportunity to be emotionally available, if we give ourselves the permission to do so, we are also offering that permission to everyone else in the space. It's a leadership move, you know?
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
And the other thing I'll say, because this is a thought leadership space,
yes,
is I had this experience when I pitched this book, that it was right at the top of the pandemic. I was supposed to go to New York to meet with publishers. My trip got canceled. It was literally mid-March 2020. And I was like,
ouch.
And I have to admit, I did have a moment of grieving where I was like, this is the project that could have been. No one's going to care about this right now. And then I was very, very lucky. I think it was this honeymoon moment when actually we were so sort of shocked by what was happening as the world shut down that we wanted to think about anything else. And 14 different publishers wanted to meet with me about this book. And my meetings all happened over Zoom. I was everybody's first Zoom author pitch meeting. And they happened over a 3-day period. I mean, wild. I had basically never pitched before in my life. And I had 14 of these. And by the end of the week, there was a 13-way bidding war. And oh, fuck, my life completely changed. But here's why I bring this up. Those meetings, all of them were different, the Brady Bunch situation. I had so many people who had read my proposal and wanted to meet with me, telling me I was, quote unquote, the next Brene Brown or a thought leader. And I definitely noticed the cynical part of me that went, oh, I see. They need to find the next Brene Brown. Oh, I get it. Right. And then I had the second thought, which was, if I merely dismiss that message I was getting over and over and over and over as, some sort of grind machine of looking for the next big thing, I'm missing the real invitation inside of it, which is, if I were, look, Brené's herself, I'm definitely not Brené. Spoiler. If I were the next Brene Brown, if any of us were the next Brene Brown, what kind of empire would we want? And if we are a thought leader, how does that affect how we show up and honor our thoughts? And for me, that was the kind of permission, I'll say, that I got externally. Do I wish that I'd been able to fully give myself that permission? I'm a thought leader, and so here's how I talk about my thoughts. Yeah, but also simmering in new shame about why I wish I'd been able to do this to myself.
Right.
Is another useless, distraction.
Indeed. Oh my
gosh. What I really can take from that is, as I tell the story in order to say, what if I didn't need those 14 deciders? What if you don't? And what if we can do this for each other? I was just talking to a friend who was like, that hype, like text chain you have. Maybe we just throw the word permission in. Maybe we say, you know what? I don't need you guys to give me permission, but like, if you wanted to every once in a while, it'll be nice. Like, we just sort of remind our friends, right? Like, Julie, you have permission to show up with strength and warmth. Advocate for your dad, knowing that actually you're advocating for the same thing they want.
Absolutely.
Which is his health.
And if I can do that, I get to also see how that rolls into the next thing. And so one of the things I think about thought leadership is that people are listening to this because even the small things, they don't feel like they have any power to affect, much less being able to dream big. And so whether it is that small thing, like this thing that's facing me down today, telling me that I don't have any power here, all the way through to my dreams, if we can just start with what my innovation buddies like Greg Sittel and Andrea Cates say all the time, of just this keystone change. Remember those wins, those little tiny things that, like, I'm going to focus here, and then I'm going to see that roll into this next level and this next thing. Because if I start talking to someone new to thought leadership about the book that they're going to write, I mean, they're afraid to even go talk to their child's teacher because it's not gone well. And so every opportunity and every little challenge around you, what can you do today to employ these tactics and to start thinking about how you can be this hero for yourself? And also because when you do, then the women around you observe and they see. Our kids will learn how to advocate for themselves.
That's right.
It's powerful.
You know, for women especially, there's so much, I don't know, a thing that is true, is what I'm trying to say, is that it goes better when we're doing it for someone else.
Yes.
So, you know, if we know that that's true, then we can hack that. We can make sure that when we're going in, you know, obviously if you're going in to advocate for your dad, that's pretty clear. But if we're going in to advocate for ourselves, well, who else will it benefit if we get a yes?
Absolutely agree.
I mean, I have, just to remind myself as I do this, this various, you know, book promotional measures, I have this note that I just put on my home screen of my phone that says, every ask, make sure I am asking on behalf of those who need this message, those who will be helped, the ancestors who couldn't access this kind of power, and the kids who must. Right?
This pause is so intentional, folks. Like, I hope you get to just sit and hear it and feel it. You come from a long line. I think it was like my great-grandmother, who died of a gangrenous appendicitis or something to that effect. And I think about the excruciating pain that so many of our ancestors have had to face. And now we get to sit down at any point we choose to and get in front of a computer with a camera built in and send out a message that can change lives. And we're yet afraid of our own voice because we've been told again. I mean, those messages, though, that we've heard from ourselves, I think at the worst. I don't think badly about myself anymore. I am my biggest fan because if I'm not, it will not matter what the people around me say.
Well, and you know, if you go to my website, the very first thing you'll see is that it says liking your voice is a radical act. And I say that because when we turn that microphone on or that camera on and we don't feel 100% like the most powerful version of ourselves, it's so easy to then start that self-recrimination shame game.
Right.
And instead, how kind to ourselves is it to be like, this is a stigma of thousands of years, but certainly the few hundred I can point to with my mother and her mother and her mother and her mother,
right,
that I am literally changing today by opening my mouth and believing that what I say matters. And I'm allowed to have that feel complicated. That's the radicalness is the bravery of doing it anyway.
I cannot believe how fast this time has flown with you. I feel like I could sit with you probably in a lounge chair, like with the beach, and we could just go on the entire day through the 50 questions that I didn't even get a chance to go to.
Oh, no.
And so what I can just say is this. I cannot wait to continue to follow your journey because I know that, you know, even as I, before this, watched your reels again, you taught me what to do with my face because I've always felt uncomfortable. But what do I do with my face when I'm sitting there watching a guest speak? It's like, just let my face be. But also, I could see what you do with your eyes and just the energy you bring, and it made me better. And I'm so grateful that we connected and that you said yes to this journey for not just me, but I mean, the people who listen, they may be in some high-ranking position, but all of us, you know, from receptionist to VP, are at our core just waiting for that permission. Thank you for this gift. This has been a joy.
Oh my gosh, my
huge
absolute
joy.
pleasure. And, you know, for those of you listening, if you want a free little warm up to answer that very first question you had about what to do beforehand, go to samarabay.com/goodies. I have this little 6-minute video I made just for you. And of course, while you're there at samarabay.com, pre-order this book, because my dream of dreams is that everyone who needs this work knows about it. And that means that those of you listening don't just read it, but enact it and spread the permission. You know, finding your voice is a group activity. We're here for each other.
Well, I'll just say that this has been a blast, and I can't wait for everyone to just get to hit play on their podcast. And so in every way that you can follow Samara, please do. And when an author creates a work like this, like a book, it is our part to not just read it because it's going to be awesome, but it is our part to support each other. So do as you will want done for your book, and go and dive right in. And thank you for being here with me today. This has been a joy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to How to Thought Leadership with Julie Morris. You can find Julie on LinkedIn and most other social media platforms. If you'd like to talk about how to increase your own influence through thought leadership, you can contact Julie through personateam.com.